Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie Schneiderite. And today we have a very special guest, Ryan O'Blenis from Spartans Illustrated. He's going to break down everything Michigan State ahead of the Rutgers Michigan State matchup this Saturday. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Excited to talk some ball.
Of course. It's been a very interesting season, to say the least, for Michigan State. Talk about kind of where things stand right now. Obviously, there was the scandal involving Mel Tucker. He was recently fired with cause from the university. So just talk about where this program stands right now. And I guess you guys had the perfect time for a bye week last week as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, it was right after the second game of the year against Richmond, where this kind of bombshell came out about Mel Tucker with, sexual harassment allegations by Brenda Tracy, who was somebody who, Tucker and the university had brought in previously to talk to the team about sexual assault awareness. She's an advocate, gang rape survivor, stuff like that. And I guess, whatever happened between her and Mel Tucker, Tucker got involved, got feelings romantically for her that she, says she didn't reciprocate. Then the whole thing happened, with the phone sex and all of that. The university was aware that these allegations were out about him, but they didn't know who the accuser was. They didn't know a lot of the details because there's firewalls in place between, the athletic department and the Title IX office. So people knew that something was going on, but they didn't exactly know what it was specifically, at least the majority of people in the athletic department and around the university. So when the USA Today article came out with all of these gruesome details and stuff like that, the next day, Tucker was suspended. Marlon Barnett was named acting head coach. A couple weeks later, Tucker was fired for cause for, violating the moral clause of his contract, essentially. And so it's been, a whole whirlwind within the program. Obviously, it's been a lot for the players to deal with, a lot for the assistant coaches to deal with. And, right now, I think everybody there is just trying to do their best to, a lot of what they say is mission focused. They still understand that they have a job to do this season. They're still trying to win as many games as they want. They say the opponents don't care about what's going on in the Michigan State program. They still have to go out and play their best and try to win games. So basically, it's been a lot of just trying to weather the storm and figure out what's going on here. So, obviously it's not an ideal situation. You lose your head coach and, you're having struggles on the field and this, that, and the other thing. But basically, Michigan State's just trying to get by as best they can right now.
All right, so obviously we were talking about, you said a lot about Mel Tucker and allegations and everything like that. Now, Harlan Bennett's taken over. I don't know how much practice access or how much access you guys have had to him so far, but how has he kind of handled the interim head coaching job so far?
Yeah, obviously for him too, it's been a whirlwind process and a lot to deal with, and it's obviously a big change. All the players, though, have tremendous respect for Barnett. They've said it. He's a guy who says he's a Spartan through and through. He played for Michigan State in the 1980s. Then he played in the NFL, and he's been coaching at Michigan State, ever since the Mark D'Antonio days. He left briefly to be defensive coordinator for Florida State, and then he came back when Tucker was hired in 2020. But this is a guy who lives and breathes Michigan State and Michigan State football. He's kind of a champion at the university and the program. So, as far as being a head coach, I think he's obviously still learning on the job. He said it's something that he's always wanted to do. And, obviously under these circumstances, it's not how he wanted to take over. But being the head coach in Michigan State's kind of been his dream job for a long time. So, essentially there's obviously like game management decisions and, personnel decisions and stuff like that I think they're still working through. Still trying to figure out what the best way to do is. And, they brought in Mark D'Antonio back as associate head coach, who is really more of an advisor role. I don't think he's too directly involved with the game planning and the decision making within games and stuff like that. But what he is a sounding board for the other coaches. Obviously, he's the winningest coach in Michigan State football history. He has a lot of knowledge of the program. He's a defensive specialist. When he talks, the other coaches listen, but he doesn't want to step on too many toes right now, the other assistant guys and Barnett and stuff. But he's basically just there to be a sounding board and to help out in any way that he's needed. So I think, Barnett is doing the best he can with the job. I think, there's things that you see within the game that, kind of make you question, like, okay, Noah Kim's been struggling. Why hasn't Caden Hauser been brought in yet? Or, why didn't they stick with the running game more against Iowa? That was working well early on in the game. So just things like that, you can't really fault the guy 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, into being thrown into a head coaching job. I think, like I said, it's kind of trial by fire. He's going to keep learning, and, I think he would really want the permanent head coaching job. I don't necessarily see that happening, but he's, a guy who could possibly be kept on the next staff if the new coach wanted him, or if he wanted to stay, or maybe he wants to pursue other things. So yeah, I mean, he's well respected. He's, like I said, he's still learning what to do to be a head coach. I think getting a win would be huge for not only Barnett but Michigan State, just to kind of get that chip off their shoulder. After all this stuff has happened, obviously Michigan State hasn't won a game since the Tucker suspension. And since the competition level has gone up and you're playing teams like Washington and then getting into Big Ten play and things have gotten more difficult. So overall, I'd still grade them as kind of incomplete. It's too early for me to tell. Obviously, like I said, there's a lot of decision-making things that I think need to be fine-tuned, especially when it comes to penalties, because Barnett is big on preaching discipline, and that hasn't really shown in games yet. Michigan State had like 10 penalties and 94, 95 penalty yards against Iowa. So at his press conference this week, earlier, he was talking about how MSU's kind of come up with creative ways to kind of quell those penalties by having refs at the practice, keeping track of everybody who gets a penalty. Then they're setting them up in team meetings, making them stand up with a penalty and a definition of the penalty. They have to read out loud to the group and then do 10 push-ups in front of everybody. So they're trying to make yeah, it's funny. So they're trying to make these changes and trying to do whatever it takes. But so far all this stuff hasn't really translated to the field. But again, effort has not been an issue at all with the players. But they've been thrown into an impossible situation. And I think another thing that kind of bodes well for the job that Barnett is doing is that they've only had one player enter the transfer portal. When Tucker was fired, a 30-day window opened up for any player. There's been two other players who are no longer with the team, but they haven't officially entered the portal yet. Running back Jordan Simmons is the only one who's officially in there. So he's done a good job of kind of keeping that locker room together despite everything of the turmoil going on in the program, which is impressive to me.
Yeah, that was what surprised me the most, is because it's different when you have a coach get fired in week 8 and the players have already played enough games where they can't preserve a red shirt. But getting fired when he did, a lot of those players still could decide to just sit out. Even if they didn't announce they're in the portal, like you said, they could still preserve a year of eligibility. So that just shows the unity in the program, it seems, behind the coaching staff that is left behind. It's always kind of awkward when, a legend comes back. Like I remember a few years ago when Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma, Bob Stoops came in and coached the bowl game. A guy like Bill Snyder came back at K-State. Obviously, I'm sure there's so much traffic right now on Spartans Illustrated talking about the next potential coach. Do you think, you already kind of said it's unlikely that Barnett is the next coach. Do you think it's just as unlikely that a guy like D'Antonio could come back? And who are some of the names that Michigan State fans are kind of hoping for in terms of their next coach?
Obviously, there's to start with your first question, I don't think D'Antonio has much interest in coming back, even if Michigan State was interested in something like that. Stranger things happen, and it would be possible. Like you brought up like Snyder at Kansas State and stuff, and Shiano even at Rutgers came back, so
Yeah, yep.
that happens. But I don't necessarily see that. I think D'Antonio has really enjoyed retirement. I think he also got out of college football at the perfect time for him, because I don't know how he would have handled, NIL, transfer portal, all that kind of stuff. But he is, like I said, the winningest coach in program history, and I'm sure he would have figured all that out. But he's kind of looked rejuvenated ever since he retired, and so I don't know that that'd be of interest for either party. Obviously names being brought up. There's a large amount of fans, for whatever reason, who want Urban Meyer to be the next head coach, which just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, given his past transgressions and everything that's going on with Mel Tucker. And, obviously in the last few years, all the scandals that the university has had and all the baggage that Meyer brings just doesn't sound like a good marriage to me. Obviously, he's one of the best college football coaches of all time, and people are valuing winning at all costs over, any perception. So I understand that aspect of it. There were rumors that Meyer was on campus, but that's not been anything that we've been able to confirm, or that, many people have been able to confirm. So I don't know if that actually happened or not, but there are people who said he visited campus, but athletic director Alan Haller said that he would be talking to a lot of people throughout this coaching search, and some people are legitimate candidates. Some people are just kind of sounding boards, or people that he's looking to get advice from. And Meyer could fit into either one of those if he was indeed on campus. So, and obviously, I think Michigan State is keeping things very, very close to the vest when it comes to this whole coaching search, because in the middle of a season right now, when this whole thing went down, and they're looking at candidates coaching at other schools who have teams of their own, locker rooms, nobody can come out and say that they're interested in this job right now. And if that stuff gets out, that can obviously hurt candidacy for certain people. So, right now, things are very quiet. Obviously, there's been a lot of different names thrown out. Charles Huff at Marshall, Mike Elko at Duke. We've heard that maybe Elko isn't interested at the moment, but that was just from one source. And again, nobody's going to say that they're interested right now. So, take everything with a grain of salt that you're hearing right now. Luke Fickell, his name has even come up. He was a guy who was very close to taking the job in 2020 before Michigan State pivoted to Mel Tucker. But obviously he just got to Wisconsin. If there are any legitimacies to his interest in the Michigan State job this time, I feel like it's more of a ploy to get, either a raise at Wisconsin or to get more NIL support funding, something like that. We've heard that Fickell is a long shot here, even though he might be willing to talk to MSU. And, then you look at some of the West Coast guys in the Pac-12 that's crumbling, like Oregon State's Jonathan Smith, Jake Dickert at Washington State. Those are names that have been thrown around a lot. And, there's been, like I said, a lot of different names that have come up throughout this process, and a lot of different names that you're going to hear for one reason or the other, whether that is legitimate or just kind of a rumor or whatever. There's definitely a lot of, I think what I'm trying to say is Michigan State's job, despite everything that has gone on in the program of late, is still going to be attractive, because you're looking at, a top 25, 26 winning program of all time, a huge salary pool for not only your head coach, but your assistant pool. There's been some recent issues with NIL, but, I think NIL support's going to be there if things continue trending. You got a brand new football facility opening up soon. So I think that there's going to be a lot of interest in the job, and it's up to kind of Michigan State right now. They have their committee that they're putting together now to kind of go through what names they're actually interested in. I think a search firm is going to be involved for at the minimum things like background checks and deniable plausibility and things like that. And overall, I think other names that have been thrown out have been like Brian Hartline at Ohio State and Sean Lewis, at Colorado, in terms of the coordinator level. And then, other head coaches that have been thrown out, like Lance Leipold at Kansas, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. So there's no shortage of names that have been thrown around. It's just now kind of figuring out which one of those are actually going to be of interest mutually.
Gotcha. So let's get into talking about this year's Michigan State team. We could start with the offense, and more in particular, I want to talk about the quarterback situation. Usually, teams on a bye week, there's been rumors about it, and usually on a bye week, they're going to switch quarterbacks. Is that the case here? Is Noah Kim gone and Caden Hauser the guy now?
I was at Barnett's press conference earlier this week. He was purposely vague about that whole thing, saying that, there's, quote, still good competition. They're going to keep it close to the vest. Those guys are competing. But then later he kind of conceded that, okay, the coaching staff already knows which way we want to go. We just don't want to say because we essentially don't want to give Rutgers a competitive advantage. To me, reading between the lines, I think, yes, that means Caden Hauser's going to start because previously, when Noah Kim was struggling and he got pulled and Hauser came in, Barnett would say, like, oh, we were just trying to get a spark. Noah's still our guy. We're still going to go with the status quo. It's obviously a very different tone and very different thing what he's saying now. Instead of backing Kim 100%, he's basically saying, we don't know yet, even though, the coaches know. We just don't know publicly. And, we've heard from some of our guys have heard that the team does indeed plan to start Hauser. We don't, you never know what could happen. It might be true, it might not be. But I would be surprised if it wasn't Hauser based on all of that. And so it's going to be interesting if it is Hauser's first start and, probably sloppy conditions and against a tough Rutgers passing defense and defense overall. Hauser might have a little bit stronger arm, maybe a little less mobile, but more mobile than you think. He's a bigger quarterback. And accuracy is going to be kind of the question mark there, and avoiding turnovers is going to be key. So, if it is Hauser, I'm very interested to see how he'll perform.
Yeah, so Hauser is a redshirt freshman. He was a class of 22, four-star recruit out of St. Don Bosco College or high school in California. He's come in for mop-up duty a few games this year. He's 9 for 16 on the year passing for 158 yards with 1 interception, no passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown on the ground. Was this a case of just, get the young guy in there to see if he's going to be a building block for this program moving forward? Because Noah Kim clearly wasn't that guy.
Yeah, I think it's more of a fact of this coaching staff's future is uncertain, and they need to win games now to, not only try to stay on staff next year with whoever the new head coach is, but it's also building their resume for whatever new staff might want them. So I think the goal is still just to win as many games as you can, no matter what. And Kim has really struggled over the past 3 games. The first 2 games, he got off to slow starts against really weak opponents in Central Michigan and Richmond, and then he kind of lit them up. And, after the first quarter, starting the second quarter, whatever. But then as the competition level got better, they played Washington, Maryland, and Iowa. And, Kim really struggled with turnovers, really struggled with accuracy off target on a lot of throws. He also had some balls that were right on the money that were dropped for touchdowns and things like that too. So I think what it boils down to is really protecting the football, being more accurate, giving yourself a better chance to win. And I do think too, if you're getting Hauser in there now, and he gets that experience for the rest of the year, that could also help him want to stay in East Lansing and not enter the transfer portal at the end of the year. Even if a new head coach comes in, obviously that's all dependent on the new head coach's plan, on Hauser's plan, stuff like that. But I do think getting him that experience now is helpful, and like you said, will be a big building block of the future. But with a future so uncertain, Michigan State's focus is just on the now right now, and they're just fighting to win as many games as they can, make a bowl game, and salvage whatever they can of this season after all the turmoil and stuff that's been going on. So that's kind of my take on it.
Now, what about the running game? I know Rutgers fans in particular want to know about Jalen Berger specifically, but I know Nathan Carter is the lead guy there. I'm pretty familiar with him because of my time with covering UConn a couple years ago, but can you just talk about his bounce back, basically? Because I know he missed the entire 2022 season for the most part.
Yeah, so Carter is a really impressive kid, both on the field and off the field. He lets his faith in God and stuff really kind of drive everything he does. And I think because of that, he kind of plays freely because he feels like that's where he needs to be. But he's physically he's very impressive. Like I said, I think earlier before we started recording, there was a video of him squatting like 600 pounds. Like you said, he recovered pretty quickly from that shoulder surgery. He's just a tough kid, good runner. He runs hard. He falls forward. Doesn't mind contact. The run blocking hasn't always been great this year. I think it's been getting better. So I think when Carter has struggled, it hasn't all been on him. It's been more about offensive line, tight end blocking, stuff like that. But he's really been the focal point of the offense. And like I said against Iowa, I think they should have continued giving him the ball a little bit more. Try to when they had the lead, try to grind out the clock, and he was getting tough yards and things like that. And I think you're going to see a heavy dose of him on Saturday against Rutgers, especially if it is rainy like it's supposed to be and it's Hauser's first start. And the conditions are sloppy. They're really going to need to lean on Carter in that run game to get those tough yards, and really try to chew the clock and control the clock, control time of possession, things like that. But yeah, I mean, Carter's been as advertised. He came into the season with a lot of hype, even though he came from UConn and he was coming off that shoulder injury. I don't think a lot of people outside the program really knew about him, but from what we were hearing during spring ball and talking to him in person during media availabilities and talking to his teammates and coaches who just raved about him, I use this not literally, but in the sense that when Kenneth Walker III transferred in, Carter's not Kenneth Walker III. Walker was a generational talent, but Carter's very good. But the vibes were kind of the same in terms of how everybody was just like, watch out for this guy. He's really good. He's going to do a lot in our running game. And he's a really unselfish guy, too. He wants to see all his other running backs and teammates do well. And as for Berger, he's been injured for a few games. He came back briefly against Iowa. He didn't get that many carries, so I think after the bye week, giving him more chance to heal up, you might see a little bit more of Berger this weekend if he's healthy and ready to go. But he was the leading rusher in 2022 after transferring in from Wisconsin, so he's a really capable back himself. He kind of really got going toward the end of the 2022 season after a slow start. So I think having that 1-2 punch and Berger being able to take pressure off of Carter is going to be really helpful. But yeah, Carter will still be the lead back at the majority of the carries.
Yeah, and he's got a crazy percentage of the rushing totals for you guys. 477 of the team's 600 rushing yards and 4 of the 6 rushing touchdowns. Who are some other players on offense that Rutgers fans should be aware of, even if it's an offensive lineman or a pass catcher? Who else should Rutgers fans be on the lookout for this Saturday?
What I should mention, too, about the running back position is that Jaron Mangum was brought in from South Florida, and he's been hurt all year. I'm interested to see if he's going to be healthy for this Rutgers game and get anything. We obviously haven't seen him this year, so I can't say too much about him, but he had, a really productive career when he was at Colorado and South Florida beforehand. He's a bigger back who can fight for yards, so Harlan Barnett said that they got some guys back after the bye week, and I'm wondering if he's one of them. But anyway, in terms of other guys who have been contributors this year, tight end Malik Carr's finally kind of starting to come around to reach his talent. He's an incredible physical specimen of size, speed, ability. He transferred in from Purdue in 2021, and people had questioned his blocking and things like that coming into the year, but I think he's really improved in that area. And as a receiver, he's really good. He had like 6 catches in the first quarter against Iowa before he got hurt and wasn't able to return. And Barnett said after the game that the plan was to feed him as much as he can take, basically. So I think you might see Carr. Barnett said he should be back for this week. So Carr could be that safety blanket for Hauser, or if it's still Noah Kim starting, I expect him to still be heavily involved in the passing game, especially, again, if the conditions are wet and they're looking to just get quick passes to the tight end and things like that. at wide receiver, there's not really a go-to kind of superstar guy there. What they do is throw a bunch of different receivers at you with Trey Mosley, Jerron Glover, Montori Foster Jr., Antonio Gates Jr., all those kind of guys who, like I said, aren't going to necessarily be guys who you have to like double team and triple team and really focus your game plan on, but who are all capable of making plays in the passing game. Christian Fitzpatrick's another one, and Tyrell Henry. So there's no shortage of names at wide receiver. It would be nice to see like one or two of those guys really step up and be able to take a game over. But again, that also I have to do on more consistent quarterback play. And so, those are kind of the names to watch. Offensive line's going to rotate a lot of guys in. You got a lot of veterans who will start, like Nick Samac at center and JD Duplain at left guard. Gino Vandermark, he was a New Jersey guy, wasn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. So is Wigginton, yeah.
Yeah, and Wigginton too. So those two are kind of. Vandermark's been out the last couple games, and Wigginton stepped in for him at right guard. So I'm curious to see if Vandermark will be back this week, and if not, it'll be Wigginton again. But either way, I expect both those two to play, significant snaps on the interior if they're both healthy, and if not, Wigginton will kind of take that over. At tackles, you got Spencer Brown, Brandon Baldwin, and a bunch of other guys who are gonna rotate in, like Ethan Boyd. Keyshawn Blackstock was a JUCO transfer who did not dress for the Iowa game. Curious to see if he'll be back. That's another guy who will rotate in. So they throw a lot of different guys at you on the offensive line. But, that starting group's obviously going to play the majority there.
Now switching to the defense, I know Rutgers has had some struggles against some of the bigger pass rushes that they've went against so far this season. In Michigan and Wisconsin. Michigan State has a pretty big defensive line. It seems like they had a huge first start to the season. They had 10 sacks in the first two games and then just one over the next three. Do you think they can bounce back after a bye week, or what seems to be the issue there? It seems like they're getting close, but they're just not really getting the sacks.
Yeah, I think you saw kind of a similar thing in 2022 as the competition level increased, the sack percentage went down, and that just kind of happens, I guess, as they're facing better offensive lines. But that is something that they need to do better, is get to the quarterback, get pressure. Similar to the offensive line, the defensive line is going to throw a lot of different guys at you. On the edges, Zion Young is a guy who can play both defensive end, or they might move inside on passing down. Same with Texas A&M transfer to Miche Adelaide. And, Avery Dunn and Chris Bogle and all these different guys are kind of playing on the ends. Brandon Wright's another one who you're going to see. And then, in the interior, Simeon Barrow Jr. has kind of become a team leader. He's a really good interior guy. Maverick Hansen, Derek Harmon. Jalen Sami was a Colorado transfer who was playing a lot early, and for whatever reasons, I don't know if he's dinged up or something else, he hasn't played as much lately, but it's another guy that you might see in the interior. So I don't know necessarily what the issue is with actually getting pressure on the quarterback. They throw a lot of these different guys in. I think the main thing is just consistency and trying to find the best combination of those guys who are actually going to work to pressure the quarterback, to take the quarterback down, to make things difficult there. So it's a lot of, like I said, a lot of different names you're going to see, and hopefully they're able to have more success against Rutgers.
It seems like the Michigan State defense in general has done really well when their backs were pressed against the wall, and I base that off of two statistics that I found interesting. One is you guys are second in the nation in third down conversion percentage allowed. You're only allowing 23% first downs on third down this year. And you're also 15th in the FBS in red zone defense. So you're only allowing opponents to score about 70% of the time when they enter the red zone, 10 touchdowns on 20 red zone appearances against teams. Are those statistics accurate, or sometimes stats aren't giving the full story? Would you agree with those stats pointing out to you guys playing well, good like bend but don't break style defense?
So I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I've been pounding the table that Michigan State has an elite third down defense like all season long, and nobody will believe me because they're so terrible on second
Hmm.
But when it does come to third down, they get a lot of stops, and that's good if you're able to get off the field or force field goals when you're in the red zone and things like that. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a bend don't break defense. I just think that they are finally able to buckle down when they get into those later downs. But the issue is more so giving up big plays on the early downs, and they need to create more turnovers, like we talked about earlier. They need to get more sacks, stuff like that. But overall, the last couple of weeks, throw out that Washington game where you're playing the best passing offense in the country with 3 or 4 NFL receivers and an NFL quarterback. But then in that Maryland game early on, they gave up, I think the defense gave up like 3 touchdowns in a row to start, but also turnovers from the offense. Gave up a bunch of short fields there, and they really buckled down in that second half against Maryland, and they really played well against Iowa, who obviously doesn't have a very good offense. So I don't know, how much you can actually read from that, but I do think that the defense is better than a lot of people give them credit for. Defensive coordinator Scotty Hazelton was talking this week that the defense has a lot of grit, and the communication has been better. In previous years, all the communication ran through safety Xavier Henderson, who was, a team leader and orchestrated the whole defense. And when he got hurt last year, you kind of saw that all fall apart. So this year, they really put an emphasis on more guys being able to communicate with each other back there and know what they're doing, and having more guys with that kind of responsibility. So, yeah, the third down defense has been really good, whether people want to admit it or not. And, obviously, some of that does come from playing weak opponents early on, like Central Michigan and Richmond, and some of it, like I said, does come from lack of success on early downs, and then finally buckling down on third down. And the red zone defense has been pretty legitimate too, as you point out. Angelo Gross had a nice interception against Maryland in the end zone when Maryland was threatening. So I think they're able to kind of batten down the hatchets there a little bit, and it's still a work in progress overall, though.
So another group of stats that I wanted to bring up, kind of the opposite side of the coin. It seems like you guys are doing really poorly. It seems like, and you can tell me if this is wrong, it seems like you guys aren't very disciplined. You're 119th in penalties per game. You're averaging about 8 penalties per game. And you're also 128th in the FBS in turnover margin. So turning the ball over a lot, not forcing many turnovers, and committing a lot of penalties. Is that fairly dead on?
Yeah, absolutely. And Barnett's talked about that a lot too, is that, Michigan State, for as much as, he obviously has been giving credit to the opponents for winning the games and stuff too, but Michigan State has made it difficult on themselves because of those penalties and because of those turnovers. Obviously there's a direct correlation between how many times you turn the ball over and winning percentage, and and penalties are obviously killers too. I think against Iowa, there were Michigan State had a 3rd and 3 late in the game. I can't remember if they were leading at the time. Oh yeah, I believe they were leading at the time. They had a 3rd and 3, something like that. They got called for 2 false starts back to back. It made it 3rd and 13. They
Jeez.
didn't convert. Then they punt, and Iowa returns it for a touchdown. So that those penalties directly correlated to that special teams touchdown, basically, because they made it so difficult on themselves. And instead of having to face a 3rd and 3 where they may have picked it up, they had a 3rd and 13 where they weren't able to, and then they gave up a touchdown on special teams. So all of that stuff has been directly related to some of these losses. And like I was talking about earlier, Barnett and the staff have been trying to put an emphasis on getting better in terms of discipline with penalties, and taking accountability, and tracking that stuff during practice, and having to get up in front of the team and do push-ups and whatever it might be. Whether that actually translates to the game field, we'll see. But that they're at least making some sort of effort to fix that. And and the turnovers, if Hauser is the starter this week, I think a big reason why is because Noah Kim kept turning the ball over and kept missing throws. So all of that stuff is, like I said, directly correlated, and has really contributed to a lot of these losses. And Michigan State has beaten themselves, over the last 2 weeks. or 2 games that they played, especially I think in that Iowa game. So, and in that Maryland game too.
So you said we'll see if it translates to the field. I think that segues nicely into making some predictions. So Rutgers opened as a 3-point favorite in this one. It quickly got bet up to 5.5. It's currently at 4.5. How do you see this game playing out?
So I think Rutgers has a very good defense, and we talked about the possible rainy, slappy conditions. Like I said, I think Michigan State's really going to have to lean on that run game. Nathan Carter, throw Jalen Berger in if he's healthy, Mangum in there too, and I expect it to be kind of low scoring because, like I said, I do like the way Michigan State's defense has been playing lately, and and Rutgers has a really good defense as well, as I mentioned. So I don't, see a lot of points, especially if it's going to be rainy, especially if it's Kate Hauser's first start, whatever. I think we're looking at a more low scoring game. I expect it to be close throughout. But I also really think that Michigan State is extremely motivated to get a win, and when everybody's counting them out, I would not be surprised at all to see Michigan State walk out of there with a 3-point win, something like 24-21, something like that.
All right, so you got 24-21 Michigan State. Richie, what's your prediction for this game?
I was actually very close to that, but I'm going lower scoring in that. I know the over-under is 39 right now. The rain definitely is going to play a major factor. Sounds like a legit thunderstorm, so we'll see how much of a factor. But I think it's just going to be run, like a typical Rutgers game. So basically nothing new there. But the clock's going to be ran out. They're going to control the tempo. I think Rutgers both covers and the under hits. So I'm going to go 20-14.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think this will be a low-scoring game. I think because we've had a few instances where we faced a quarterback coming into their first start this year with their team, Ben Bryant with Northwestern, who's a veteran, but the first time playing with a team. And same thing with turmoil. Kyron Jones with Virginia Tech coming into his first start against Rutgers. I have a hard time seeing Hauser kind of overcome those odds. I'm also going to say Rutgers covers, but it's not going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be something like 21-13 with, some missed extra points, a lot of turnovers, just ugly in general. But I think Rutgers pulls it out. Ryan, we really appreciate you coming on and chopping this up with us. Is there anything you wanted to hit on before we sign off, or anything you want to plug? Where can we find your work? Where can we find you on social media? Those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely come check us out at SpartansIllustrated.com or MichiganState.Rivals.com. You can find us on Twitter at SpartansRivals. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan O'Bleness, RyanObleness. Thank you for having me on, guys.
Yeah, of course. All right, guys. For me and Richie and for Ryan, this has been another edition of the Knight Report podcast. Signing off.